William sat in his study at Kensington Palace, staring at the unopened letter in his hands. The royal crest felt heavier than usual as he turned the envelope over and over. Kate noticed his unusual silence during breakfast that morning. She had seen him worried before, but this was different. There was something in his eyes that made her stomach turn with anxiety. The letter had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by a private courier who refused to say where it came from. The man simply handed it over, bowed slightly, and disappeared into the London morning fog. Since then, William had carried it everywhere, never opening it, but never letting it out of his sight either. Kate tried to focus on her daily duties, meeting with charity representatives and reviewing upcoming royal engagements. But her mind kept drifting back to her husband. She had learned to read his moods over the years of their marriage. This wasn't about royal duties or public pressure. This was personal, and it was eating him alive that evening. As they sat in their private quarters, Kate finally decided she couldn't watch him suffer in silence anymore. She set down her teacup and moved closer to him on the sofa. The children were asleep, and the palace felt unusually quiet around them. "William," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm, "you haven't been yourself since that letter arrived. Whatever it is, we can face it together." He looked at her with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. For a moment, she thought he might finally tell her what was troubling him. Instead, he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens that had been in his family for generations. "Some things are better left unknown, Kate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some secrets are buried for good reasons." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. In all their years together, William had never kept anything this serious from her. They had always been a team, facing every challenge together. From the intense media scrutiny during their courtship to the pressures of royal life after marriage, they had shared everything. She watched him standing there, shoulders tense, still clutching the unopened letter. The moonlight cast long shadows across the room, making everything feel more mysterious and unsettling. Kate had grown up reading fairy tales about princes and princesses, but real royal life was nothing like those stories. It was filled with duty, sacrifice, and sometimes secrets that could change everything. The next morning brought news that would make everything more complicated. William's private secretary entered his office with another message, this one marked urgent. It was from an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Hastings, claiming she had information about the letter he had received. She said she'd been waiting 40 years to tell someone the truth, and now time was running out. William felt his hands tremble as he read her message. Mrs. Hastings lived in a small cottage in the Cotswolds, about 2 hours from London. Had worked at various royal properties throughout her life, starting as a young maid in the 1980s. Her message was brief but haunting. "Your Royal Highness, the letter you received contains only part of the truth. If you want to know what really happened to your mother that night, come alone. Some secrets have kept our family safe, but others have caused nothing but pain." Kate noticed the change in William immediately when he returned home that evening. The color had drained from his face, and his usual confident demeanor had been replaced by something she had never seen before: fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from public speaking or difficult royal duties, but deep personal terror. She tried to get him to eat dinner, but he just pushed the food around his plate. Their children chattered about their day at school, but William seemed to be somewhere else entirely. Kate made excuses to the children and sent them to play in another room. "William, this has gone far enough," she said firmly. "Whatever is in that letter, whatever this woman has told you, we need to deal with it together. You're scaring me." Looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something that broke her heart. He looked like a lost little boy, the same expression she imagined he must have had when he learned about his mother's death all those years ago. "Kate, what if everything we've been told about that night was a lie?" I asked, his voice cracking. "What if the car accident wasn't really an accident? What if there were people who wanted my mother dead, and they succeeded?" Kate felt the room spin around her. She had heard the conspiracy theories over the years, the whispered rumors and tabloid speculation, but William had always dismissed them. He had made peace with his mother's death, or so she thought. She realized he had never stopped wondering, never stopped hoping for answers. She moved to sit beside him, taking his cold hands in hers. "Then we find out the truth," she said simply. "But we do it together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." William squeezed her hands, grateful for her strength. He knew that whatever they discovered might change their lives forever. The royal family had survived scandals before, but this felt different. This was about Diana, the people's princess. It's the woman whose death had shaken the entire world as they sat together in the growing darkness. Both of them knew that their comfortable, predictable royal life was about to be turned upside down. The letter still lay unopened on the table between them, holding secrets that had been buried for over 2 decades. Outside, London continued its busy pace, unaware that 2 of its most beloved royals were about to embark on a journey that would test their marriage, their faith in the institution they served, and their understanding of the family they had married into. The clock in the hallway chimed midnight, and Kate realized they had been sitting in silence for hours. Tomorrow, they would have to make a decision that could change everything. Tonight, they simply held each other, gathering strength for whatever. Truth awaited them behind that mysterious door of secrets. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Kensington Palace as Kate woke to find William's side of the bed empty. She found him in the kitchen, fully dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee and staring at the mysterious letter that had now consumed 3 sleepless nights. "We're going to see Mrs. Hastings today," he said without looking up. His voice was steady, but Kate could hear the underlying tension. "I can't live with this uncertainty anymore." Kate nodded, understanding that this moment had been inevitable. Since the letter arrived, she quickly got ready, arranging for the children to spend the day with their grandparents. They told no one else about their plans, not even William's security team. This journey felt too personal, too dangerous to involve others. The drive to the Cotswolds was mostly silent. William gripped the steering wheel tightly as they wound through the English countryside. Kate watched the landscape change from urban, sprawled to rolling green hills. Wondering what secrets lay hidden in the cottage they were approaching, Mrs. Eleanor Hastings lived in a stone cottage that looked like something from a storybook. Roses climbed the walls, and a small garden path led to a bright red door. Despite its charming appearance, Kate felt a sense of foreboding as they approached. Eleanor Hastings was in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets. She greeted them at the door with a mixture of nervousness and relief, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. "Your Royal Highness," she said, curtsying slightly. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult, but there are things you need to know. Things that have been hidden for far too long." She led them into a cozy sitting room filled with old photographs and mementos from her years of service to various royal households. Kate noticed several pictures of Diana among them, images she had never seen before, showing the princess in casual, unguarded moments. "I worked at Highgrove House in the 1990s, Eleanor began, her hands shaking slightly as she poured tea. "I was there during some of the most difficult times in your parents' marriage. I saw things, heard conversations that I was never supposed to witness." William leaned forward, his entire body tense with anticipation. "What kind of things?" Eleanor walked to an old wooden desk and retrieved a small wooden box. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents that looked official and important. Kate could see William's hands trembling as Eleanor placed the box between them. "Your mother was being followed, Your Highness. Not just by photographers, but by people who worked for very powerful individuals. She knew it, and she was terrified. The last time I spoke with her, just weeks before her death, she gave me these items and made me promise to keep them safe." Handed William a letter written in Diana's distinctive handwriting. Kate watched her husband's face as he read, seeing shock, anger, and heartbreak pass across his features in waves. "She writes about feeling threatened," William said, his voice barely audible. "She mentions specific people, powerful people who wanted her silenced. She says if anything happens to her, it won't be an accident." Kate felt her world tilting on its axis. The woman she had admired from afar, whose legacy she had tried to honor through her own royal duties, had been living in fear during her final weeks. Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger as she finally shared the burden she had carried. "For so many years, Princess Diana had discovered something, Your Highness. Something about arms deals and secret government contracts that involve people very close to the royal family. She was planning to expose it all. William stood up abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the peaceful garden. Kate could see his reflection in the glass, and the pain on his face was almost unbearable to witness. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Kate asked gently. "Why wait all these years?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid, Your Highness. The same people who threatened your mother made it very clear that anyone who spoke out would face consequences. I was a single mother with a young daughter. I couldn't risk her safety." She explained how she had received threatening phone calls in the weeks following Diana's death, how strange men had appeared near her home, how she had been forced to move 3 times before settling in this remote cottage. "But now, I'm dying," Eleanor said, matter-of-factly. "Cancer. The doctors say I have perhaps 6 months. My daughter is grown and safe, living in Australia. I couldn't take these secrets to my grave." William returned to his seat, his face pale, but determined. "Who sent me the letter? How did they know you had this information?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "Your mother had a loyal friend, someone who has been watching over these secrets for years, waiting for the right time to reveal them. Someone who loved her dearly and has been seeking justice ever since." She handed them another envelope, this one addressed to William in different handwriting. "This person has been gathering evidence for over 20 years. They have proof of everything your mother suspected, and more." Kate reached for William's hand as he opened the second letter. Inside was an address in Scotland and a message that made both of them gasp. Diana's death was no accident. The truth is hidden in plain sight, protected by the very institution meant to serve justice. Come alone at midnight on the anniversary of her death. Trust no one from the palace. Your mother's killer is still alive and still dangerous." The room fell silent except for the ticking of Eleanor's grandfather clock. Kate felt as if she couldn't breathe. Everything they thought they knew about Diana's death, about the investigation, about the royal family itself, was being called into question. "There's more," Eleanor said quietly. She handed them a key, old and ornate. "This opens a safety deposit box in Edinburgh. Your mother's friend put additional evidence there, things too dangerous to keep in one place." William stared at the key, as if it might explode in his hands. Kate realized that their quiet, dutiful royal life was over. Whether they wanted it or not, they were now part of a decades-old mystery that could destroy the monarchy itself. "What do we do now?" Kate whispered to Eleanor. Stood up suddenly, looking every one of her 70-plus years. "That depends on how much truth you can handle, Your Highness, and how much you're willing to risk to get justice for your mother." As they prepared to leave the cottage, Kate realized that they were no longer just visiting an elderly woman with old stories. They were standing at the edge of a precipice, about to jump into a world of conspiracy, danger, and long-buried secrets that could change British history forever. The drive back to London felt like a journey through a different world. Kate watched William's knuckles turn white as he gripped the steering wheel, processing everything Eleanor had revealed. The key to the safety deposit box sat between them, like a ticking bomb, representing knowledge that could destroy everything they had built together. "We need to be careful about who we trust," William said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "If what Eleanor said is true, then people we consider, family might be involved." Kate felt a chill that had nothing to do with the English weather. She thought about all the royal family gatherings, the formal dinners, the private conversations they had shared with relatives and staff over the years. How many of those smiling faces might be hiding deadly secrets? That evening they sat in their private study, surrounded by Diana's letters and photographs that Eleanor had entrusted to them. Kate found herself studying pictures of her late mother-in-law with new eyes, seeing the fear and exhaustion that she had missed before. "Look at this," William said, holding up a letter dated just 2 weeks before Diana's death. A meeting she had with someone from MI6. She says they warned her to stop investigating, but she couldn't give up. She felt she owed it to the British people to expose the truth. Kate read over his shoulder, her heart breaking for the woman who had died so young, carrying such a heavy burden. "She was braver than anyone knew," she whispered. William's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop digging or face the consequences. Some secrets are worth killing for. Both of them stared at the screen in shock. Someone knows we visited Eleanor, Kate said, her voice barely steady. Someone is watching us. William immediately called his head of security, but then stopped before the call connected. He remembered Eleanor's warning about trusting no one from the palace. Instead, he hung up and made a different decision. We're leaving London tonight, he told Kate. We'll tell everyone we're taking a private holiday in Scotland. We need to get to that safety deposit box before anyone realizes what we're doing. Kate's mind raced with the implications. They would be putting themselves in danger, but staying in London might be even more dangerous. She thought about their children, sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that their parents were about to embark on the most dangerous journey of their lives. They packed quickly and quietly, leaving detailed instructions with Kate's sister about the children's care. William arranged for a private car to take them north, avoiding their usual security protocols. Every decision felt like a gamble with their lives. The drive to Scotland took most of the night. They stopped only once at a small roadside cafe, where Kate noticed a man in a dark coat watching them from across the parking lot. When William went to pay for their coffee, the man disappeared. But Kate couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Edinburgh looked different in the early morning light. More mysterious and ancient than Kate remembered from previous visits. The bank where Diana's safety deposit box waited was in the heart of the old city, surrounded by narrow streets and hidden alleyways that seemed perfect for surveillance, or worse. William had called ahead using a false name, claiming to be a lawyer settling an estate. The bank manager, a stern Scottish woman named Mrs. MacLeod, led them to the vault in the basement of the building. The box was rented by a Miss Sarah Thompson, Mrs. MacLeod explained. Not recognizing the royal couple in their casual clothes and dark sunglasses, she paid for 25 years in advance and left specific instructions that only someone with this key could access it. Kate held her breath as William inserted Eleanor's key into the lock. The box opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through the small vault room. Inside were documents, photographs, and a letter addressed simply to Diana's son. William's hands shook as he lifted out the contents. The photographs showed Diana at various locations, always with the same mysterious figure in the background. A tall man in expensive suits who appeared to be following her every move. My God, Kate whispered, studying one of the images. Documented her own stalking. The documents were even more shocking. They included copies of secret government contracts, bank records showing suspicious financial transactions, and correspondence between high-ranking officials discussing the Diana problem. In terms that made Kate's blood run cold, but it was. The letter that broke William's heart completely. Written in Diana's careful handwriting, it was her final message to her son. A confession of love and fear that she had hoped he would never need to read. My dearest William, the letter began. If you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I pray that you are old enough to understand and strong enough to seek justice, not just for me, but for all the innocent people who have been silenced by those who value power more than truth. Diana went on to explain her investigation into arms dealing and money laundering that reached the highest levels of government and the royal family itself. She had discovered that certain members of the establishment were profiting from conflicts around the world, selling weapons to both sides and pocketing millions while people died. I have tried to expose this through proper channels, Diana wrote, but I have been threatened, followed, and warned to stay silent. They think they can intimidate me because I am just a divorced princess with no real power. They are wrong. The truth will come out, with or without me. Kate wiped tears from her eyes as William continued reading. The letter revealed names of people they knew, trusted friends of the family, who had apparently been part of the conspiracy to silence Diana. The final paragraph was the most heartbreaking. William, I need you to know that everything I did was to make the world safer for you and Harry. If something happens to me, please don't let them convince you it was an accident. Fight for the truth, but be careful who you trust. Even within our own family, there are those who value money and power more than justice. William folded the letter carefully, his face a mask of grief and rage. Kate had never seen him look so lost and so determined at the same time. "We have enough evidence to destroy half the government," he said quietly. "But who can we trust to help us? Who can we turn to when the corruption goes this deep?" Mrs. McLeod knocked on the vault door, reminding them that their time was nearly up. As they gathered the documents and prepared to leave, Kate noticed one more item in the box, a small recording device with a note attached. "Play this when you're ready to know who killed me." William pocketed the device without hesitation. They thanked Mrs. McLeod and left the bank. But not before Kate noticed the same man in the dark coat from the cafe standing across the street, talking quietly into a phone. "We're not safe here," she told William as they walked quickly toward their car. "We need to find somewhere secure to listen to that recording." William nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I know a place, somewhere even they won't think to. Look for us." As they drove away from Edinburgh, Kate realized that they had crossed a point of no return. They now possessed evidence that could bring down the government and expose corruption at the highest levels of British society. Also had targets on their backs, and nowhere left to run except toward a truth that might cost them everything they held dear. William drove them to a remote castle in the Scottish Highlands, a property that had belonged to Diana's family long before her marriage to Charles. Kate had never seen it before, and its isolation both comforted and terrified her. The ancient stone walls seemed to hold centuries of secrets, and now they would hold one more. The castle's caretaker, an elderly man named James, had worked for Diana's family for over 50 years. William trusted him completely, knowing that James had loved Diana like a daughter and had been heartbroken by her death. "Your Highness," James said, his weathered face showing surprise and concern as they arrived unannounced. "Is everything all right? You look as though you've seen a ghost." "In a way we have," William replied quietly.
"How, James?"
"I need you to promise me that no one knows we're here, no one at all." James nodded solemnly, understanding that this was no ordinary visit. He led them to a small tower room that had once been Diana's favorite retreat when she visited as a young woman. Kate could almost feel her presence in the space, surrounded by books and personal items that had remained untouched for decades. With trembling hands, William took out the recording device they had found in the safety deposit box. Kate sat beside him on the old sofa, both of them knowing that whatever they were about to hear would change their lives forever. Diana's voice filled the room, clear and strong despite the obvious fear beneath her words. "This is Princess Diana, recording this message on August 15th, 1997. If anyone is listening to this, it means they have succeeded in silencing me, but the truth will not die with me." Kate felt tears start to flow as she heard the voice of the woman she had only known through photographs and videos. There was a strength in Diana's tone that reminded her of William, a determination that no amount of threats could break. "Weeks ago, I met with a man named Colonel Marcus Ashworth," Diana continued. "He works for a private military company that has been selling weapons to terrorist organizations while publicly supporting peace initiatives. The profits from these sales have been funding a shadow network within the British government, a group that operates outside of parliamentary oversight." William's face went pale as he recognized the name. Colonel Ashworth had been at Diana's funeral, standing among the military honors guard. Kate remembered seeing him at several royal functions over the years, always in the background, always watching. "Colonel Ashworth thought he could intimidate me into silence," Diana's voice continued. "He told me that accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. He said that even a princess isn't safe if she threatens the wrong people's business interests." The recording paused, and they could hear Diana's shaky breathing. Kate realized she was listening to a woman who knew she was in mortal danger but refused to back down. "I've documented everything," Diana continued. "Bank records, photographs, recorded conversations. I've hidden copies in multiple locations. If something happens to me, William will know where to find them. My son deserves to know the truth about the world he's inheriting." William stood up, abruptly pacing to the window as his mother's voice continued to detail a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. Kate watched him struggle with the weight of this knowledge, understanding that his entire worldview was crumbling around him. "The worst part," Diana's voice said, "is that some of these people are supposed to be our friends. Lord Harrison, who comes to every royal gathering, has been laundering money through his charity foundations. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood, who advises the Queen on financial matters, has been taking bribes to influence government policy. Even some members of our own family have been turning a blind eye in exchange for generous donations to their favorite causes." Kate gasped at the mention of Lord Harrison. She had worked with him on several charity events, had trusted him with sensitive information about royal finances. The thought that he had been part of a conspiracy to kill Diana made her feel physically ill. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, with Diana methodically listing names, dates, and locations where evidence could be found. Her voice never wavered, even as she described threats against her life and fears for her son's safety. "If they kill me," Diana concluded, "they will try to make it look like an accident. They've already suggested that my erratic behavior and emotional instability make me a danger to myself. Don't believe them. I am thinking clearly, and I am fighting for the future of our country. William, if you're listening to this, please be careful. Trust no one in the establishment. Find people outside the system, people who can't be bought or intimidated. The truth is worth fighting for, but not worth dying for. Stay alive to see justice done." The recording ended with a soft click, leaving the room in heavy silence. Kate reached for William's hand, finding it ice cold despite the warmth of the Scottish afternoon. "She knew," William said finally, his voice hollow. "She knew exactly what was going to happen, and she couldn't stop it." James appeared in the doorway, having heard the emotional conversation from downstairs. "Your Highness, there's something else you should know. After the princess died, several men came here looking for her personal belongings. They claimed to be from the palace, but I didn't recognize any of them. I told them nothing was left here, but I lied." He led them to a hidden panel behind an old bookshelf, revealing a small safe that had been built into the castle wall centuries ago. Inside were more documents, photographs, and what appeared to be original contracts signed by the people Diana had named in her recording. "She brought these here herself, just days before she died," James explained. "She said if anything happened to her, I should only give them to William when he was old enough to understand. I think that time has come." Kate studied the contracts with growing horror. They detailed arms sales to governments that were publicly enemies of Britain, kickbacks to political figures, and worst of all, plans to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose the operation. One document made her blood run cold. It was a memo, dated 3 days before Diana's death, discussing permanent solutions to the princess problem and suggesting that an unfortunate accident would be the most effective way to silence her. William read the memo over her shoulder, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Kate recognized the signs of a panic attack and guided him to a chair, talking softly until his breathing returned to normal. "We have to do something with this information," Kate said firmly. "We can't let her death be meaningless." William nodded, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "But who can we trust? This conspiracy involves people at every level of government and the royal family. How do we expose them without getting ourselves killed?" James spoke up from the corner of the room. "The princess mentioned someone," he said slowly. "A journalist she trusted, someone she had been working with secretly. His name was David Morrison, and he works for an independent newspaper that can't be bought by the establishment." Kate felt a spark of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. "Do you know how to contact him?" James nodded. "The princess left his information in the safe. She said he was the only reporter she trusted to tell the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be." As evening fell over the Scottish Highlands, Kate and William found themselves at another crossroads. They could take the evidence to David Morrison and risk everything to expose the truth. Or they could bury it again and try to live with the knowledge that Diana's killers had never been brought to justice. Looking at William's determined face, Kate knew what they had to do. The truth was too important to hide, no matter what the cost. David Morrison lived in a converted warehouse in Liverpool, surrounded by filing cabinets, full of investigative reports and walls covered with photographs and newspaper clippings. Kate felt like she was entering the headquarters of a one-man war against corruption. Morrison himself was not what she had expected. A quiet man in his 60s, with kind eyes and calloused hands from years of typing on old computers. "I've been waiting for this day for 27 years, Morrison said simply when William introduced himself and showed him Diana's letter of introduction. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She died trying to save this country from people who would sell it piece by piece for profit." Morrison's apartment was like a shrine to investigative journalism. Every surface was covered with documents, photographs, and computer equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Kate realized that this man had been living as a target for decades, constantly looking over his shoulder while fighting for truth. "Show me what you found," Morrison said, clearing space on a large table. As William laid out the documents, photographs, and played Diana's recording, Morrison's face grew increasingly grim. "This is even worse than she suspected," he said after reviewing everything. "Colonel Ashworth died in a skiing accident 5 years ago, but his organization is still operating. Lord Harrison is now chairman of 3 major charities and has access to billions in funding. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood was just appointed to the House of Lords." Kate felt sick. These men had not only gotten away with murder, they had been rewarded for it with more power and influence. Morrison pulled out a thick file folder. "I've been tracking these same people for decades. Your mother's evidence fills in gaps I could never prove. Together we have enough to bring down the entire network." Showed them photographs taken over the years, documenting secret meetings, money transfers, and weapon shipments. Kate was amazed by the dedication this man had shown to seeking justice for Diana. Working alone and unrecognized while the official investigation closed the case as an accident. "But publishing this story will put all of us in danger," Morrison warned. "These people have killed before, and they won't hesitate to kill again. Are you prepared for that?" William looked at Kate, and she saw the same determination in his eyes that she had heard in Diana's voice on the recording. "My mother died for this truth," he said firmly. "Won't let her sacrifice be meaningless." Morrison nodded and began making phone calls to editors, lawyers, and security experts who had been waiting years for this moment. Kate watched in amazement as a network of journalists, investigators, and activists mobilized around them, all dedicated to finally telling Diana's story. "We'll publish simultaneously in 12 countries, Morrison explained. "The story will be too big to suppress, and the evidence too overwhelming to deny. But we need to move quickly. Once word gets out that you've been asking questions, they'll try to stop us." Over the next 3 days, Kate and William lived in Morrison's warehouse, helping to prepare the most important news story of their lives. They worked alongside journalists who had risked everything to uncover corruption, activists who had spent years fighting for justice, and technical experts who knew how to protect sensitive information from those who would destroy it. Kate found herself thinking about their children constantly. What kind of world were they creating for the next generation? Would George, Charlotte, and Louis grow up in a country where truth mattered more than power? Or would they inherit the same corrupt system that had killed their grandmother? On the 3rd night, Morrison's security system detected intruders approaching the building. Within minutes, the team had evacuated through a hidden tunnel that connected to the old Liverpool dock system. Kate felt like she was living in a thriller novel, except the danger was real and the stakes were life and death. They relocated to a safe house in Wales, where Morrison's contacts had established a secure communication center. From there, they continued preparing the story while staying one step ahead of the people who wanted to silence them. "The story goes live tomorrow morning," Morrison announced on their final evening together. 12 newspapers, 3 television networks, and dozens of online publications will simultaneously release everything we've uncovered. By noon, the whole world will know the truth about Princess Diana's death. Kate couldn't sleep that night. She stood at the window of the safe house, looking out at the Welsh countryside and thinking about the woman she had never met, but whose legacy had shaped her entire adult life. Tomorrow, Diana would finally get the justice she had died seeking. William found her there at dawn, both of them holding cups of coffee and watching the sun rise over the mountains. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. Kate thought about their children, their duty to the crown, and their responsibility to the British people. "I'm ready," she said. "Diana deserves the truth, and so does everyone else." Morrison joined them as they watched his secure communication devices light up with confirmations from news outlets around the world. The story was being transmitted simultaneously to prevent any single source from being stopped or suppressed. In 1 hour, Morrison said, the biggest conspiracy in British history will be exposed. The people responsible for your mother's death will finally face justice. Kate felt tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt hope. Diana's voice would finally be heard. Her investigation would finally bear fruit. And her sons would finally know the truth about the woman who had given her life to protect them and their country. William squeezed her hand as they prepared to face whatever consequences would come from their decision to seek justice. They had chosen truth over safety, justice over comfort, and Diana's legacy over their own protection. The world was about to change forever, and they had made it possible. By refusing to let fear silence them the way it had silenced Diana all those years ago. As the clock struck 9 in the morning, news outlets across the globe began publishing the story that would expose the conspiracy that had murdered the people's princess. Kate and William held each other close, knowing that they had honored Diana's memory in the most powerful way possible by ensuring that her death would finally bring the justice she had died seeking. The world exploded into chaos within hours of the story's release. Kate watched from the safe house as news channels across the globe led with headlines about the conspiracy that had killed Princess Diana. Social media erupted with millions of people demanding justice, and governments scrambled to respond to the explosive revelations. By noon, Lord Harrison had been arrested at his London mansion. Sir Geoffrey Blackwood was detained at Heathrow Airport while attempting to flee to a country without extradition treaties. Within 24 hours, a dozen high-ranking officials had either been arrested or had mysteriously disappeared from public view. The Prime Minister is calling for a complete investigation, Morrison reported, monitoring news feeds from around the world. Parliament has announced emergency sessions. The Queen herself has issued a statement supporting a full inquiry into the allegations. Kate felt a mixture of relief and terror. They had succeeded in exposing the truth, but now they faced the consequences of challenging some of the most powerful people in the world. William hadn't spoken much since watching the arrests begin, processing the reality that people he had known and trusted his entire life were being led away in handcuffs. 3 days after the story broke, they received word that it was safe to return to London. The public outcry had been so overwhelming that even the conspirators' remaining allies couldn't risk protecting them. Kate and William found themselves surrounded by armed security as they made their way back to Kensington Palace. But this time, the protection felt genuine rather than threatening. Their children ran to embrace them as they walked through the palace doors, and Kate realized how much she had missed their innocent laughter during the nightmare of the past 2 weeks. George, Charlotte, and Louis had no idea that their parents had just changed British history forever. "Daddy, why were you gone so long?" Charlotte asked, clinging to William's leg. William knelt down to her level, his eyes filled with tears that Kate knew came from thinking about his own mother. "We were doing something very important for Grandma Diana," he said softly, "something she would have been proud of." The days that followed brought a parade of investigators, lawyers, and government officials to the palace. Kate watched William give testimony that would send multiple people to prison for life, describing evidence that proved his mother had been murdered by a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The most emotional moment came when William was asked to read Diana's final letter aloud in court. Kate sat in the gallery watching her husband honor his mother's memory by ensuring her words were heard by the world. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom, as Diana's voice seemed to speak from beyond the grave, demanding justice for herself and all the innocent people who had been silenced by corruption. 2 months later, the trials began. Kate and William attended every day, watching as the people responsible for Diana's death were finally held accountable. The evidence was overwhelming, and one by one, conspirators were sentenced to life in prison. Colonel Ashworth's organization was shut down and its assets seized. The weapons trafficking network was dismantled, saving countless lives in conflict zones around the world. The corrupt charity foundations were investigated and their stolen funds returned to legitimate causes. But perhaps most importantly, British government implemented new transparency laws that would make such a conspiracy impossible in the future. Diana's death had finally brought about the changes she had died trying to achieve. On the anniversary of Diana's death, William and Kate stood together in the garden at Kensington Palace, surrounded by thousands of flowers left by people from around the world. The public response had been incredible. Diana was no longer just remembered as a princess who died tragically young, but as a hero who had sacrificed her life to expose corruption and protect democracy. She would be proud, Kate said softly. Holding William's hand as they read the messages of love and gratitude from people whose lives had been touched by Diana's courage, William nodded, his voice thick with emotion. She always said that the truth would come out eventually. I just wish she could have lived to see it. Kate thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The mysterious letter, the terrifying revelations, the dangerous investigation, and finally, the justice that Diana had died seeking. It had tested their marriage, challenged their faith in the institutions they served, and forced them to choose between safety and truth. The door she couldn't open in life, we opened for her, Kate said, thinking about all the secrets that had finally been revealed. Her voice was finally heard. That evening, they sat with their children in the same study where this journey had begun. George was old enough to understand some of what had happened, and William began to tell him about his grandmother, not just the sanitized stories he had heard before, but the truth about her courage, her investigation, and her sacrifice. Grandma Diana was very brave, William explained to his son. She saw people doing bad things and she tried to stop them, even though it was dangerous. Because of what she did and because we continued her work, those bad people can't hurt anyone anymore. Charlotte looked up from her coloring book. That why everyone loves Grandma Diana so much? Yes, sweetheart, Kate answered. People love her because she cared more about doing what was right than about being safe. She taught us that the truth is always worth fighting for. As they tucked their children into bed that night, Kate and William reflected on how much their lives had changed. They were no longer just ceremonial royals attending charity events and cutting ribbons. They had become part of Diana's legacy. Protectors of truth and justice in a world that often valued power over principle. The mysterious door that had hidden Diana's secrets for so long was finally open. The truth that had been buried with her was now part of history. And the conspiracy that had seemed so powerful and untouchable had crumbled in the face of one woman's courage and her son's determination to honor her memory. Standing together, in their bedroom, looking out at the lights of London, Kate and William knew that they had kept faith with Diana's final wish. Her death had not been in vain. Justice had been served, and the truth that she had died protecting would ensure that future generations would live in a more honest and transparent world. The tears they had held back for so long finally came. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and pride. Had solved the greatest mystery of their generation, brought down a conspiracy that had operated in shadows for decades, and ensured that Diana's sacrifice would be remembered not as a tragedy, but as the catalyst for lasting change. The secret behind the door had finally been revealed, and with it, the truth that would honor Diana's memory forever.